Hi, I'm Keith Baker, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about deliberate practice and what that means and what that looks like. Firstly, I want to point out what deliberate practice is. It turns out that Anders Ericsson and his colleagues first defined the term back in the early 1990s. They studied elite musicians in Europe and asked the question, what was different about those who were at the highest level of performance in the music conservatory? I picked off some of the key features of what they found about what defines deliberate practice. The actual activity that is used to achieve high performance. Firstly, this activity called deliberate practice is really for a single purpose, to improve performance. This is not just playing the piano for fun, this is not playing chess for fun, but this is engaging in those activities for the sole purpose of improving performance. There are very specific tasks that are used to overcome weaknesses. One is focusing on the parts of their performance that are not where they want them to be. This activity is structured and very purposeful. It has been selected as an area to work on. It also requires quite a lot of effort and it does not come naturally. People don't spontaneously usually engage in this. Performance is monitored to know whether or not you achieved your goal, and I'd say it requires a learning orientation because by definition, you're working on something that is not coming easily to you. It is difficult and you may fail at it from time to time. So learning how to cope with failure and treat it as an opportunity for improvement is quite foundational and necessary to engage in high-end performance. There are some other findings out of the Ericsson paper. They found out that this generally is not inherently enjoyable, including by people who are elite performers. Elite ice skaters, chess players, violinists, and so on do not actually enjoy this process, but they also recognize that this process called deliberate practice is necessary for growth and improvement in their domain. It does not have immediate rewards. While one is doing this, they're not getting measurably better. This takes time, and over time, using this process, one improves. And it also generates cost in terms of effort, time, and usually some sort of activity that's been set aside for this purpose. Because it's not inherently fun, it is effortful or even difficult. It takes a lot of self-regulation to engage in the process of deliberate practice. And that's a talk for another time. I want to point out how deliberate practice pertains to a series of activities to show you how it is germane to simple memory concepts or thinking or knowing material information, hand-eye coordination, which in this case I'll show you shortly is about the violin, but it can be any hand-eye coordination activity you want, cognitive decisions or thinking type activities. And then finally, I'll show you what it looks like for advanced cardiac life support for physicians. So this slide is one that comes from a very basic proof of concept idea. We're going to take somebody named SF. SF is a standard or a normal college student who has a normal IQ and a normal memory span. That's where he starts at the very beginning of this process down here. You can see that before he practices, he can remember about 7 digits, which is normal for an adult human. Then with the process of deliberate practice, where he is going to be learning to recite numbers and read them back, where the process is if he gets the sequence correct, they will add a digit and then he has to recall that sequence. So they give him a string of digits, he has to recite them back. If he fails, they shorten the string by 1 digit. He tries again. If he fails, they shorten by another digit. Or if he gets it correct, they add a digit. If he gets that correct, they add a digit. So it goes. So he's always working on the edge of failing because every time he gets it right, they make it a little bit harder. They don't tell SF how to do this. He figures it out himself through the process of deliberately thinking about this and practicing this. And you can see this is quite a lot of practice. These are hour-long episodes up to 5 days a week for many weeks. So this took over 2 years for him to learn how to do this. And you can see here that his memory skills for random digits improved and ultimately reached what are called savant level. In other words, he was appearing to remember digits, random sequences of digits, at a level that was previously considered only achievable by savants. It turns out this was not a generalized skill. This was only for remembering numbers. When they asked him to do letters, he was completely normal and there was no special skill in remembering letters. So this was specific to numbers, and what he had done was develop cognitive structures and processes in his mind to learn how to do this. I won't tell you exactly how he did it because it's not relevant, but the point is, through deliberate practice, extraordinary levels of performance can be achieved under some circumstances. The next study here has to do with the amount of time that elite musicians spend in deliberate practice. In this case, deliberate practice is time spent working on the hard parts of the music, working on one hand versus the other. It's working alone. It's not playing for fun. This is very purposeful, working on the challenging parts of the musical performance. And you can see here on the y-axis is the amount of hours these people spent in this activity of deliberate practice. And what I draw your attention to is that for any given age at which the musicians were studied, the more they engaged in this deliberate practice, the higher their level of performance. And you can see for musicians who reached the age of 20 years old, and again, these are elite level performers at a conservatory in Europe, you can see that the fair, the good, and the very best all engage in different amounts of practice alone, where they're purposely focusing on just improving their performance. This is not playing with another group. This is not simply playing the music. This is working on specifically improving their performance. The same finding was made by another group with chess, where they've operationalized deliberate practice in chess as studying alone, where you're not playing chess, but rather you're looking at what grandmasters have done in prior chess games, where you're studying those moves, deciding how to make them, why you didn't make them. So this is very rigorous study of prior games and the best moves one could make in those prior games as made by the best chess players in the world at that time. As you can see here on the y-axis, this is serious study alone, this type of deliberate practice I'm talking about. And you can see that as the chess players get better and better, the best chess players are spending a lot of time studying games alone to figure out the best way to improve their chess game. This study moves much closer, and this has to do with medicine, or what's called advanced cardiac life support. And this is a randomized controlled trial with internal medicine physicians. What they've done is taken these doctors who are in their internship, first and second years of internal medicine residency, and they've taken them to the simulation lab and had them do a whole variety of ACLS algorithms. The score is shown here on the y-axis, and higher is better. At baseline, each group did as well as the other, which is expected for a randomized group. And the next thing that happened was the group in gray, shown here, was taken and allowed to engage in deliberate practice for the next 3 months, about once a week or so. They were working on improving their skills at performing advanced cardiac life support. They would identify any weaknesses in their algorithms. They would get formative feedback, identifying what they needed to do it better. They would correct this response and do it again. And so it goes, and so it goes, until they were distinctly better at carrying out the algorithms. So about 3 to 6 months later, they're all brought back to the simulation lab, and you can see that the group that engaged in deliberate practice did distinctly better. That's this group right here. I'd like to draw your attention to the group here that didn't do any deliberate practice. These are physicians who continue to be on call and respond to cardiac arrest throughout the hospital, and they engage in continued ACLS in the usual manner, which is called the practice of medicine. And you can see this practice of medicine, which I've abbreviated with a P, results in absolutely no inherent improvement in performance. It is the process of deliberate practice that renders a better performance. This group here then itself went to the simulation laboratory and engaged in deliberate practice, and they too improved their performance. So doing things repeatedly does not inherently improve you. Purposeful engagement and deliberate practice can. So I'd like to show you what you might expect from deliberate practice. So to put this in context, I've put down a number of activities here and the relationship of one item to the next. So we oftentimes think of obesity as being a dangerous thing for somebody's health, and this relationship between obesity and mortality has a correlation coefficient, as you see here, 0.08, to a small relationship. Smoking and mortality has a larger relationship, but still not as high as you might think. IQ and income, the same way. Smarter people do tend to have somewhat higher incomes, but it's not a massive effect. Batting average in the Major League Baseball and Major League Baseball salary is much more strongly related. In this case here, very careful study is showing what deliberate practice has to do with performance, shows that the correlation is actually similar to, in this case, batting average in Major League Baseball salary. The point is that engaging in deliberate practice across a variety of activities does relate to performance, and the size of the outcome is shown here. So you can expect that this has a positive impact, and it's not trivial. Thanks again for spending some time on the Expert Pathway. See you next time. Bye-bye.